there's no rational reason. The traditional justifications that marriage and child rearing are so closely connected just doesn't hold up anymore.
And we should say again, as we go along with the show, that we're talking on the legal ladder here. We are leaving out whatever the religious or whatever controversial, political controversial things might be in going forward in the state of Rhode Island. But we're talking about the strict legal thing, and a marriage of any kind doesn't have to be in a church to be legal.
Right.
That's what it is.
And I have long fought through my life to keep politicians out of my bedroom, so to speak. So I think all of these things are working for things that are civil rights that are all too often trampled upon. But keep going. So where are we in Rhode Island?
Well, if we take one more peek at the Massachusetts situation and we say that it's not rational to define marriage as heterosexual couples because of the harm it does to the parties that are not able to marry, then we come to the conclusion that a constitution that provides for common benefits and common protections of its citizens can't tolerate a ban on gay marriage. Certainly not where there are no policies that are opposed to it, and where all the policies that are so well settled in our law, giving children an equal start as the big example, are so in favor of recognizing gay marriage.
And no longer calling children, as you said, bastards, and no longer putting a stigma on unwed mothers. And single parenthood is
Part of the
too
landscape.
much part of the landscape. Yeah. So, okay, so there we
Exactly.
are.
And when people get married in any state, we don't say to them, so, planning to have children? We don't check up with them a year later and we say, so, you got those children yet? We don't make it a prerequisite that they can have children. People can get married in their 90s. So marriage and child rearing really are separate. So,
Very much. Also, based on the research that I've done through school and with the Alliance, it's pretty much in Rhode Island Constitution. It's Article 1, Section 2, I believe, and the language is very similar to the Common Benefits Clause in Baker v. State, which is the Vermont opinion of it. So when you look to compare to constitutional analysis versus just like regular statutory or even the case law, you need to look at the intent of the framers. You look to other certain aspects when they were drafting it. You don't just look to the language, which is very helpful to begin with. But just looking at also with the Attorney General's opinion and with what he just came out, it just seems like the case has been building and building in Rhode Island, it's very good. And I don't know. You want to add anything else?
so why isn't it as good as we think it
Why
is?
isn't it as good as you think it is? Well, I think that there are a number of factors at play. First of all, we still have to deal with the fact that people are not comfortable with gay relationships. They're not comfortable with gay people in their communities. So that's the first step of it. There's a real sense, and it's sometimes clearly articulated and sometimes sort of hidden under the surface, that if you allow same-sex couples to marry, in some way you're giving value to immorality or sinful acts and sinful behavior. And I think that's a place where people get hung up and stuck on just their gut discomfort.
But isn't that basically a religious-sponsored?
It's often an idea that is fostered and carried out by religious institutions, but it's something that I think people who are not particularly religious in their own lives, there's still a discomfort in a sense that, you know, these are people who are different, and do we really want to treat them the same? And I think that that's something that's been very difficult to overcome in the legislative arena, and certainly in the public opinion arena. If you look at any polling data, the best case we're coming up with is that there's about 50-50 support and opposition for the right of same-sex couples to marry. If you talk about legal benefits, you see much more support for same-sex couples having legal protections and legal benefits. It's something about this word of marriage and how it's been portrayed in large part by the religious right as being something that has never changed throughout all of history. It's exactly the same as it was at the dawn of time, and that all cultures have had it look exactly the same, right? And, you know, for many of us who know anything about history, we know that that is not true.
Right.
Even in recent history, that there was a time not so long
Certainly
ago.
not all cultures.
Certainly not all cultures, and we can go back into ancient history and find that. But even in recent history, that there was a time not very long ago when women were the property of their husbands. There was a time not very long ago, in fact, much more recently than many of us are comfortable admitting, when it was illegal to marry somebody of a different race. And those are clearly fundamental changes. And a lot of the rhetoric that we hear around what will happen if we let same-sex couples marry is very similar to the rhetoric that we heard about what would happen if we let people of different races marry. The decline of Western civilization would quickly ensue.
Right.
Can I ask you a question? Have you heard
Absolutely.
consideration of the effect on children of same-sex couples? Because it seems to me that we all remember knowing parents of our children's friends or our own friends when we were children, and the parents were maybe weird, but we never thought the children deserved to be
You mean like
tarred with
the children of hippies or the children
Yeah.
of mixed marriages?
Right,
or,
exactly. And
Yeah.
so if one looks at the angle of a child, then even an irrational prejudice, it seems to me, is vulnerable.
I think that what is challenging for people is that it continually gets put forth that same-sex couples cannot naturally conceive children. That's a true fact, right? I mean,
That's a true fact.
We can all, I think, agree that that is a true fact. So the difference is that if you have a man and a woman who are a hippie, they had those kids, and it's no fault of the children's own that their parents are a little funny.
Oh, there's a
Versus allowing a same-sex couple to adopt, or even, many agencies in Rhode Island encourage same-sex couples to adopt. There are a lot of children who need homes.
Right.
Encouraging lesbian couples to conceive through artificial insemination, or any of the other assisted technologies that allow people to reproduce without a man and a woman in the traditional sense in the same room at the same time.
There are such great policies that shoot down that whole misguided idea that marriage is better between men and women. Like, do we want children to be the product of accidents?
Right.
Do we as a society make that our compelling policy?
And I have heard many compelling legal arguments that if one has to go through a whole rigmarole and a very long process and jump through multiple hoops in order to have a child placed in their home, that that's somebody who's clearly thought about over time whether they're prepared to parent, that somebody else has made an assessment that yes, in fact, they are ready to parent. Social workers don't come to your house and make sure that you're ready to parent before you conceive.
Right.
That's
true. Yeah.
And
But
it's very
the children that are
interesting.
born of rape and incest and a few other little problems that
And
we have.
it's always very interesting to me to hear people couch their concern about allowing same-sex couples to marry in concern for the children. There's no credible data that shows that children of same-sex couples fare any worse in any social ramifications, any school achievement levels, not a single piece of data. But it's something that people can grasp to reinforce their personal bias or their discomfort with same-sex people, same-sex couples living in their community, same-sex couples raising children. It's something that people aren't yet ready to fully embrace.
In fact, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court makes that point. There is no evidence that a child brought up by same-sex parents does any differently, and they do just as well as children brought up by any other parents.
And you had said before something about children faring better when their parents are married. Well, that's very true. And so sometimes people who oppose same-sex couples getting married will look at data that compares married couples to unmarried couples, or that looks at married couples as compared to single parents. Well, it makes sense that a child who has two adults who are there to care for them at any point in time would be able to, do better in school, have more parents showing up at their school functions, all of that sort of stuff.
And
than
play
somebody,
one parent against another.
well, that's true too. But certainly then somebody who has one parent who's trying to support the family and also take care of the kids is, much more stressful on that person to have to do it alone. It's also interesting to me when I hear people say that essentially if you don't allow same-sex couples to marry, they'll go away. They'll disappear. These children will not exist. The couples won't exist. That's just a fallacy. And whether or not we allow same-sex couples to marry today, or 20 years from now, or 50 years from now, there are going to be gay and lesbian people in our communities, and a lot of them are going to be raising children. So we need to understand that that's a reality.
There's a lot of gay and lesbian wildlife, and not just humans. It's all perfectly natural as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
But